I still remember the lazy rhythm of that morning, the soft clink of coffee mugs, the low murmur of the river just beyond camp, and the smell of frying trout on the cast iron pan. There were 5 of us, me, Mark, and the Benson brothers, plus old Pete, who'd driven up from Flagstaff with his fly rods neatly wrapped like sacred scrolls. We'd set up deep in the Mogollon Rim country, tucked beside a narrow river that wound through pines and aspen, the kind of place where the air always feels just a little cooler than it should. The plan was simple. 3 days of fishing, long naps and tall tales around the fire. Nothing fast, nothing hard. That was the point. By mid-morning, we were scattered along the riverbank, each chasing our own bit of solitude. Mark had wandered upstream, humming to himself, while I stayed near camp, tending the skillet. Pete was fussing over his tackle box as though he were tuning a violin. I remember thinking that the day was shaping up perfect. The sky, that clean, endless blue, the kind that makes you forget anything beyond the tree line. Then we heard it, the distant chop of a helicopter echoing over the ridge. At first, it didn't register. You hear all kinds of sounds in the wild, wind moaning through canyons, a hawk's cry that can fool you into thinking it's something mechanical, but this was steady, urgent. It grew louder until we could see it. A Ranger chopper, dull green against the sunlight, circling low over the river before banking toward us. It didn't land, just hovered long enough for a voice on a bullhorn to cut through the trees. "Fire east of the canyon! All campers must evacuate. Repeat, mandatory evacuation by sundown." Then it was gone, the thumping fading into the silence it left behind. We stood there, coffee cooling in our hands, nobody saying a word. The Benson brothers exchanged a look. Pete, calm as ever, just muttered, "Well, that changes things." Mark was the first to move, tossing dirt over the cooking fire. The wind shifted then, faint but wrong, carrying that dry electric scent you never forget once you've smelled it. Smoke. Distant still, but enough to send a knot into my stomach. The kind of smell that says the world is rearranging itself faster than you can pack a tent. We had maybe 6 hours to cover 12 miles of rocky trail back to the truck. I remember looking at our setup. All the gear spread out like a garage sale. Coolers, rods, folding chairs, even Pete's canvas cot, and realising there wasn't time to save it all. We'd spent 3 days building a little kingdom by the river. Now we had to abandon it in an afternoon. And somewhere out there, beyond the ridgeline, the forest had already begun to burn. We moved fast, but the air already carried that tense stillness that comes before disaster, the kind that makes even the birds go quiet. The sun hung white and pitiless above us as we tore through camp, shoving what we could into packs. Decisions came, Sidroy, quick and harsh. Take the tent poles or leave them. Keep the cook set or grab more water. Pete knelt by his gear, whispering a quiet goodbye to his favourite rod before strapping only one to his pack. Mark dumped our cooler, fish and all, cursing under his breath as the trout slipped back into the shallows. By the time we set off, smoke was curling faintly across the valley, like ghostly fingers. The trail wound uphill through dense pine, switchback after switchback, the heat building with every step. We didn't speak much, just the crunch of boots, the rasp of breath, and the occasional metallic clatter from someone's pack. Every now and then, the wind would shift, carrying a low roar from somewhere far off, the unmistakable sound of a wildfire feeding on timber and wind. About an hour in, the Benson brothers fell behind, one of them nursing a twisted ankle from a bad step on loose shale. We gathered under a stunted pine, the air hot enough to sting when you breathe deep. Mark looked back toward the smoke and said what we were all thinking. We can't stop long. Pete, old and steady, tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and wrapped the ankle. He can walk, he said. Just slower. We'll make it if we don't waste time. So we pressed on, redistributing weight, leaving more gear at the side of the trail, packs half-zipped and stoves gleaming like small offerings to the mountain. The slope grew steeper and the forest began to thin, giving us flashes of what lay behind, a grey curtain of haze crawling closer, devouring the horizon. The air thickened, gritty on the tongue. At one point, we reached a ridge. where the wind hit us full in the face. Down below, the valley we'd camped in was no longer green. A wall of smoke rolled through it like an ocean wave, pulsing with hidden flame. Even from that distance we could hear it, like a freight train with no brakes, all fury and motion. "Move!" Mark shouted, urgency cracking through his voice. Nobody argued. We climbed higher, the trail turning to jagged rock, packs cutting into our shoulders. The world had narrowed to sweat, smoke, and the rhythmic thud of boots. I remember glancing back once more, the river glinting faintly beneath that growing storm of ash, and feeling a strange mix of awe and sorrow. We were trespassers being driven out by something older and far less patient than us. By the time the first flecks of ash began to drift around us, we were still 2 miles from the peak, 2 miles from the only spot where we might catch a signal strong enough to call for help. And the fire was coming faster than we'd imagined. The climb became a race against sound and smoke. Each gust brought the deep, rolling growl of fire getting closer, wood exploding, branches snapping like gunfire. The sky turned the colour of rusted copper, and the light dimmed to something unreal, like late evening, though my watch said noon. Every breath burned. Every swallow of air carried the taste of charcoal and pine pitch. We stopped only once, at a rocky outcrop where we could see the valley behind us. What had been a patchwork of green now churned beneath a thick brown fog. The fire line had jumped the river. Flames leapt up the canyon walls, climbing faster than anything alive could run. I felt the heat on my face even from that distance. Mark stared at it, jaw clenched, sweat cutting pale lines through the soot on his cheeks. "We're out of time," he said simply. We moved again, faster now, lungs screaming for air. The Benson brothers were limping but determined, leaning on each other, muttering curses between ragged breaths. Pete, God bless him, just kept a steady rhythm, small deliberate steps, his hat pulled low against the swirling ash. I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the treetops behind us burst into flame. The trail forked near a granite outcrop. The map said left led to the lookout peak. Right descended toward an old service road. We hesitated, choking in the haze. The lookout was higher ground, safer from the flames maybe, and with luck a signal. The road meant faster travel, but straight through dense timber that was already hissing with heat. "We split," Mark said. 2 and 3. But Pete shook his head. "No, we stay together. Fire moves like water. It'll go where the wind takes it. Higher's safer for now." No one argued. We veered left, climbing into the open. The trees thinned to twisted pines, their needles rattling in the dry wind like bones. Somewhere below, we heard the first panicked calls of deer fleeing uphill, a rustling stampede vanishing into the smoke. My throat was raw. My shirt clung heavy with sweat and ash. Every muscle screamed for rest, but the sight of that orange glow chasing us up the slope was all the motivation we needed. When we finally reached the rocky crest, we found a narrow patch of bare granite. Nothing but stone, scrub, and a rusted survey marker. Pete pulled out his phone, holding it high like a torch. For a second, nothing. Then, miracle, a single flicker of signal. He turned slowly, whispering a prayer, until a weak bar appeared. He hit the emergency call and shouted into the wind, "4 hikers, fire below the rim, requesting immediate evacuation." Static. Then a garbled reply, faint but real. "Copy. Hold position. Helicopter inbound." We looked at one another, eyes watering from smoke, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Somewhere beyond the haze, the thumping of rotors began again, distant but closing fast. We'd made it to the ridge. But the mountain wasn't finished with us yet. The chopper's echo grew louder, but so did the fire's voice, an angry roar crawling up through the canyons below us. I could feel its heat pushing the air upward in hot, ragged breaths. The trees near the lower switchbacks were beginning to shimmer, their branches curling and blackening in the distance. Every gust of wind sent a new shower of embers skyward, swirling around us like a storm of angry fireflies. The pilot's voice crackled again over Pete's phone, barely audible through the static. "Too much smoke in valley, need clear zone, marking coordinates." Then silence. We scanned the ridge, realising the helicopter couldn't land here. Too narrow, too uneven. We'd have to move again, this time across the spine of the ridge to a plateau half a mile west where the stone flattened out. Half a mile. In normal weather, that would have been a 10-minute walk. But now, every step meant balancing on loose rock, choking on smoke, and dodging gusts that could throw sparks into our packs. Mark led the way, his shirt pulled over his mouth, hand shielding his eyes. The Benson brothers followed, one leaning heavily on a stick they had found, the other guiding him along. Pete stayed back with me, both of us turning every few seconds to watch the inferno chase our shadows. We didn't talk anymore, there wasn't breath to spare. The air hummed with the sound of the forest dying, cracks and sighs, and a distant, mournful boom as some great pine exploded from the heat. The sky was a strange orange-grey dome now, and even the sun had vanished behind it. The world felt smaller, reduced to the patch of ground under our boots and the next few feet ahead. When we reached the plateau, the wind shifted again, clearing the haze just long enough for us to see the helicopter circling above. Its rotors cut through the smoke like the wings of a desperate insect. We waved our arms, yelling hoarsely, though we knew the noise was lost in the wind. The pilot must have seen us, because a red flare dropped from the open door, trailing smoke as it landed in a nearby clearing, our signal to move there. That last stretch was the hardest. The plateau tilted gently downhill toward the clearing, and the ground was littered with dry grass and scattered brush, kindling waiting to catch. We sprinted, packs bouncing, the roar behind us deepening into something almost physical, a living wall of sound. My legs felt hollow, every step powered by fear and adrenaline alone. We tumbled into the clearing just as the helicopter descended, wind whipping our faces and flattening the grass. The pilot hovered barely above ground, shouting through a megaphone, "Drop the gear! One at a time! Move!" We obeyed without question. Packs, rods, tents, all left behind in a heap as we stumbled into the downdraft, helping each other into the open door. Mark was last, leaping in as the flames began licking the edge of the plateau. Then the ground fell away beneath us, swallowed in smoke and fire. The helicopter lurched skyward, blades hammering against the hot, rising air. I looked down through the open door where our little camp, the river, the clearing, even the crooked pine where we'd hung our lanterns, had vanished into a writhing sea of flame. The heat pressed upward, fierce and greedy, while the smoke rose around us like the breath of some ancient creature. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We just watched, faces streaked with soot, as the fire rolled through everything we'd called home for the past few days. From above, it was strangely beautiful, terrible, but beautiful. Tongues of orange light raced along ridgelines, chasing each other like lightning made of fire. The forest below seemed alive, pulsing, shifting, collapsing. I thought of the trout we'd released that morning, darting through water that was now boiling in places, and it hit me just how fragile this wilderness was, and how easily it could remind us that we never truly belonged here, only borrowed the space for a time. The pilot shouted something back to us, but his words were lost in the roar. I caught only fragments. Safe zone. 10 miles north. Hold tight. Pete gave a weary nod and slumped against the cabin wall, his hands still blackened from ash. The Benson brothers sat shoulder to shoulder, one clutching his wrapped ankle, the other staring out the window with glassy eyes. Mark met my gaze across the cabin, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, we both laughed softly. Not from humour, but from the simple relief of being alive. When we touched down at a ranger outpost an hour later, the sun was a dull red ball sinking behind the smoke. A line of emergency trucks waited, their lights cutting faint circles through the haze. Medics checked us over, handed us water bottles that felt almost sacred after the dry heat we'd endured. A ranger, soot-streaked and bone-tired, told us we'd made it out with less than an hour to spare. The fire had already crossed the ridge where we'd been found. That night, as we sat by a small controlled fire at the base camp, ironic really after fleeing one so wild I couldn't stop thinking about what we'd left behind. All our gear, our comfort, the illusion of control we'd carried into the woods. The mountain had stripped that from us, left only what truly mattered, breath, companionship, and the will to keep moving. I still dream of that morning by the river, the smell of coffee and pine, the quiet laughter before everything changed. But the fire taught us something I'll never forget. That out here, peace and peril share the same sky, and sometimes you don't get to choose which one finds you first.